Hello, hello, hello. I hope you guys can hear me. This is Stacy, and we are getting started with Femme Fridays. I'm so pumped to be here and to be connecting with all of you on this amazing Friday afternoon, or almost afternoon, depends on where you are. And we're going to be talking about all things equity, diversity, inclusion, burnout, overwhelm, managing all the things as a woman. And this conversation is not just for women, right? It is for us and by us, but it's not just for women. The reason I'm creating this conversation space is to also help to educate and to understand the male perspective, to educate men and to also understand the male perspective. So everybody is welcome to join. And this conversation, whichever topic it is that we speak about, will hopefully be one that not only adds value, but also gives some insight. I'm here to learn, I'm here to share, and I'm looking forward to all the different things we're going to be picking up over the next few weeks. So, welcome to Femme Powered. Welcome to Femme Fridays. And today's discussion is based on a conversation that I've actually been having on LinkedIn. So, I am streaming live to Facebook as well as to YouTube. So, depending on where you're catching me, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to keep up with all the different comments because it is just me over here sitting down doing this. So I had a question that I had asked on LinkedIn, and it was getting a lot of traction. Like there was a ton of feedback coming from the LinkedIn crowd, and so I thought, this would make a great topic for Femme Fridays. Now, the intention of this space is really about education and awareness. And so, if we're thinking about it from that perspective, I really want to learn and I really want to share about this particular topic. And the topic is how women are going to succeed in a male designed and dominated workforce. I want to make something clear though before I get started with discussion. And that is, I'm really not interested in bashing men or in highlighting all of the different challenges that we have without looking at the solutions or the desired thing that we want, the desired outcome or the desired shift that we are going after. I think we spend way too much time focused on just the piling on the data about what's wrong. So we know that there are things that we're seeking to change and seeking to shift. And so I want to understand what would it look like if we made those shifts. And so this conversation that I was having on LinkedIn was one that was really cool because it essentially was asking the question, if you could design your workspace as a woman, right? If you could design that, what would it look like? What would that work design look like? And so I actually got some very interesting answers, and really interesting answers came across from all the different persons that, both persons that are a part of my network and even persons who are not a part of my network. Several of those persons came across to share just their perspectives. And so I was like, these are really cool responses. So let's start off by just maybe, highlighting what when we say we talk about a male dominated workforce, what does that mean? So there's lots of discussions now about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's lots of conversations also about the space of overwhelm and burnout that women are experiencing. And essentially, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to identify how women could have maybe impacted the current experience if they were able to design the workplace, the workforce, the workspace, the environment within which we work. And I thought it was a really cool discussion to have. And so many women chimed in, and a couple of guys also chimed in. And so I wanted to kind of touch on one of the things that a guy responded and said, right? And his response was that, he really wasn't aware of all the different challenges that women went through um, because of their monthly cycles. And then my thought process was, especially since I'm connected to a lot of women in the C-suite space, who do tend to be, 40, 50 years old, 40 plus, 50 plus. And I thought about women who are going through menopause or any other, hormonal change that women experience that men don't experience. And so essentially what I ended up coming away with was just the thought process of, wow, if we were actually the ones designing our workforce, then possibly we would be having completely different experiences. Possibly we would have created this environment where work is working for us and not against us. Now, can you imagine, as a woman, you are going through menopause and you have a board meeting, as an example. So you're a female, you're going through menopause, you have a board meeting, and you're in this board meeting and you get a hot flash, right? And you're like sweating, and you're trying to find the AC, and you're trying to hold your composure. And I don't even think I believe that we ignore that these things are actually happening. So when you think about the things that actually cause stress on women in the workplace, it's things like that, where we're not necessarily accounting for the possible issues that may be experienced as a part of just being a woman. So some suggestions that we got were, having some very specific type of uh, leave designed for women who are going through hormonal challenges, which are a natural part of how we are being or who we are being or what's happening with us, right? And I thought it was a great suggestion. I then immediately got a conversation from another male CEO, was like, well, a lot of women are going to abuse that. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's kind of cyclical, right? So it's not like it's rocket science. We can come up with some kind of innovative solution that, if we're dealing with your menstrual cycle as an example, like that's one thing that is just, kind of glaringly obvious. Maybe you have a day, an additional day or two that is assigned as sick leave that is optional, that can be utilized for women who have really bad cycles, as an option. So I actually thought that was a really bold idea that came forward from one of the males that responded to the question that I asked, rather than one of the females. Something that came up multiple times in person's feedback was the concept of having in-home childcare facilities. And I don't think I've ever worked anywhere that actually had in-home childcare facilities. I have worked, I think when I was at Macy's Systems and Technology, they actually had a nursing room. So if you were a recent mom that had come back to work, because you only get a couple of weeks off, I think it's like 6 weeks. If you're coming back to work and you need to pump, one of the things that they thought about was, hey, let's make this area available so that you can go and you can pump your breast milk in that area, and you can get back to work relatively easy. Now, when I was going through my mothering of my third child, actually, I used the mothering room. I did at the nursing room. I used it every day, twice a day, while I was when I got back to work. And so for me, it was a huge benefit. I felt so empowered, and I was walking around with my little nursing bag, and I was like, yes, feel like a boss. So I will say that for sure, every office, every company would have a nursing room. There was another one that talked about not having rigid hours, the flexible work schedule, which, because of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot more of that, where it's flexible work schedules and more time frames where you're not being judged, or your performance is not being based on how many hours you're actually in the seat at the desk. It's not like, oh, she showed up at 8 and she left at 6. So that means that she put in a full day's work, right? For a lot of women, as I was saying, we go through reasons and seasons of change, and maybe we work better at night. Maybe we have to come a little bit later because we have to drop off the kids, and maybe we have young children, and so we have to pick them up in the middle of the day, which is where the childcare part comes in, right? Maybe we pick up in the middle of the day. So we want to have that flexibility to be able to manage our tasks. Because it's not the time that you're managing, it's really the tasks that you're managing. We want the flexibility to manage our tasks around a more flexible schedule. And what that flexibility looks like is not being judged on when you arrive and when you leave, but more so the output or the outcomes, the results that you're delivering. So I thought that was actually really consistent in terms of the feedback that came across. So that's two things that we've touched on so far. We've touched on or three. We've touched on the support for women who have challenges during their typical monthly cycle. Making sure that we have maybe a day or 2 days was my idea. Have an extra day, a sick day that is use it or lose it in the month, right? It doesn't roll over kind of thing. And this was put forward by in terms of having some kind of solution for women. That was put forward by a man. So my solution was, hey, have an optional additional day or two of sick day that does not roll over, that can be used by women because they may or may not have challenging cycles. Having the childcare facilities on premises, I haven't seen that too much, I suppose, depending on where you are. Maybe the larger companies will have childcare facilities, because I understand where it can be costly. However, when you look at the cost benefit analysis, it may prove that you get more hours from your women if they have reliable childcare support on the plant, right? So there's that, childcare facilities. And then there was also the coming out of that, I talked about having the nursing room. So for moms who are lactating and still nursing their babies, they can go back to work and know that they have the power to be able to step away for a break and go do that nursing thing. So I thought those suggestions were really good. And then also one that was very common was the flexible hours. So not judging a person based on when they're sitting in that desk or when they walk through the door, but based on when they are, what they're putting out, the output, the performance of their delivery and their team. Now, from a woman's perspective now, let's say, for example, you are in this work environment, the one that we're all in during this time, and you don't necessarily have a very female supportive environment. So possibly you are one of those women who may need the support. You're one of those persons who may need that additional support because you have childcare needs, or your work hours are different or whatever, and your current work environment does not support that. You don't have to feel, and when I say support it, meaning it's not written in a policy somewhere, or it's not readily you're not seeing a lot of other women take advantage of it, or other women stepping into that space. It does not mean that you can't create something for yourself, right? Or for yourself and for other women. It doesn't mean a possibility for you. And so I'm recommending first and foremost that you check the policies, because sometimes into a company and you just assume that the thing that you desire from that employer doesn't exist because you're not seeing other people take advantage of it. And that's a big mistake that we often make, right? Nobody's saying that companies are going to come out of their way to make sure that we have an optional additional sick day available for you to take. If you're a woman, they may not advertise the benefits, for example, right? And if you don't have flexible work hours public somewhere, it doesn't mean that it's not available to you, or that it's not an opportunity for you to actually create something that does not currently exist. So I think that that's the first thing. The first thing to do is to check it out. Go check with HR. Do we have so and so policy available to us to utilize, right? Second thing is, if there is no policy, create one, write something up. I'm not saying to become an HR expert, but put together a business case. Put together a business case and get a couple people to sign it. Get some other women to sign business case for you, do a little internal kind of tete-a-tete, see what is at demand, like what are women caring about, and then have a conversation. So I definitely think as women, we tend to focus, and people in general, it's not just women, we tend to focus on what is not there, what we don't like, right? Because it's essentially how we were trained. I think our brains are programmed to identify the pain so that you can do something about it. What actually works really well and allows you to step into that space of power faster is if you are actually examining what you want to happen. So, what do I want my work environment to be? When we talk about a male dominated workforce or a male created workforce, yeah, it's a natural evolution. The way that corporate is structured, the way that government is structured, the work environment 9 to 5 that you live in now is a natural evolution of how corporate started, how it was designed, and who it was for, who were the ones that were in there, right? Remember, we're coming from a space where women were predominantly homemakers, or in some instances, if they were working, they were teachers or they were tradeswomen, like, doing dressmaking or textiles, etc., right? And so, or servers, etc. And so the corporate office structure was based on a male's life. So if you weren't gone off to war, then you were back home building industry. And so you were coming into the office, you leave your home, your wife kisses you on your cheek, you leave your home, you're coming at a particular time. You may or may not, depending on how far back we're going, have had a secretary that is there typing away, serving and supporting the male's needs, right? You go in at 9, you do whatever you're doing, and then you're leaving at 5. Now, in between all of this, woman is now at home, cooking, cleaning, taking the kids to the school, bringing them home, or homeschooling, preparing for when you come back, right? And when the men come back, sorry. And so when you think about work from, that's how it used to be. And now we're like, well, we want equity, we want inclusivity. And it's like, well, are you able to just step into that design and succeed? It's going to be hard, right? And so my perspective and my belief is that equity and diversity and inclusivity programs will continue to fail unless we are able to actually design a system or a workforce that supports the way that a woman actually works. And not just the way you execute work, but the facets, the aspects of your life that affect your work, because you are also typically the primary caregiver. Now, I know that nowadays we have lots of men who are choosing to stay home, who are being more inclusive fathers, etc. But the majority of us are still not in that space, right? So let me repeat. I believe that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, as well as any efforts to create an environment that promotes women in leadership, having more access to higher demanding roles and to bigger teams and to creating a bigger impact, those efforts will continue to fail unless we are supporting the women's lifestyles that accompany them in that leadership space, right? So what do those things look like? It looks like knowing that some women have children. And if we have children, then we're going to need to manage childcare. So childcare needs to be the first part of the conversation, not on the back end, like, oh, you also have a child, well, let's figure that. No, it's a part of the design conversation. So when you're doing your design thinking for the new workforce of the now, not even the tomorrow, we have to design think. Wow, thunder. We have to design think in there. We have to design think in their childcare. We have to design think in their taking care of the female body, which is different. We have to design think in their maybe taking care of parents or spouses. We have to design think into the work environment, women's bodies and the different needs we have than men, and how our burnout factors work compared to a male's burnout factors. So all these different aspects of our work environment and who we're being have to be considered when we're now looking to empower and advance women in their careers. All right. Now, those are just some tips, guys, and a taste of what we're going to be doing here on Femme Fridays. We want to talk about all the different things that are in the space right now as women seek to become more empowered in the work world. And this is not about attacking the companies, this is about women tooling up themselves so that they can step into their power, own it. They can enhance their presence and create more influence on their team members, their leaders, their colleagues, right? And also to really make sure that we're not creating this continuing the creation of this burnout and overwhelm culture that is now the norm. There is so much critical illness and stress related illness and disease that is in the space now. And it's like we're normalizing it as opposed to addressing the behaviors that women need to be shifting in order to show up in a more empowered way. So, guys, Femme Fridays every other Friday here, at least as best as possible until the end of the year, and then we'll assess. We'll see. We'll have had a good 3 months there. We'll see. Are we building traction? Are the conversations helpful? Are people finding things that they want to talk about? It's time to essentially do a lunch and learn, and you can bring your paper bag lunch and have a chat with yourself and myself, or you can bring some other colleagues, some other female colleagues, and the guys too. Don't leave out the guys so that we can all be learning and growing together. So thanks so much for joining our first conversation, guys. Much more to come. I do hope to see you on another epic episode of Femme Fridays. Take care, everybody. Stacy signing out.